I heard her say it from the hallway. Not in a whisper. Not even behind closed doors. She said it loud enough to echo through the vents. Bold as brass, standing in my kitchen, like she owned the place. "This house is so depressing," Ellie said, her voice pitched high with theatrical disgust. "The minute it's ours, I'm gutting everything. The wallpaper, the lighting, that weird old piano, gone. Every inch of this place needs to be ripped apart." Then laughter. Not just hers. Another voice, younger and sharper. "Oh my God. Totally. It's like walking through a museum that smells like, I don't know, mothballs and regret." My granddaughter, Harper, 17, and already so jaded she could slice steel with her sarcasm. I stood frozen in the front hallway, one hand wrapped around a brown paper bag of groceries, the other still gripping my car keys. I hadn't slammed the door when I walked in, a habit from years of trying not to startle anyone, so they didn't know I was home. The sun was still shining through the front windows. Outside, birds chirped. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor's lawnmower hummed. But inside me, everything went still. Harper kept going. "Can you imagine trying to host a graduation party here? Like, where would people even stand? In the sad little garden with the broken wind chimes?" Ellie scoffed. "We'll have it remodeled long before then. I'm thinking open concept, white walls, marble countertops. And obviously, that creepy library has to go. No one reads actual books anymore, right?" A pause. And then, as if she couldn't help herself, "Honestly, she probably won't last much longer. She's been slowing down so much. Did I tell you she asked me the other day if I'd seen the plumber, like she forgot he was here last week?" Harper gasped like she'd found the final clue in a murder mystery.
Wait.
"Are you saying she's, like, going senile?" "I'm saying," Ellie replied, dragging the words out, "we might not have to wait much longer." I couldn't breathe. The kitchen was just around the corner. I could see the edges of their shadows from where I stood, just out of sight, but close enough to count the syllables of every word that sliced into me like a blade. They thought they were alone. They thought I was already gone, in every way but physical. I stepped forward slowly, letting the keys in my hand jingle deliberately as I dropped them into the ceramic bowl on the entry table. The sound made Ellie jump. She turned.
Paled.
Harper blinked, her smirk fading. Her phone slid under the counter, like she could hide behind it. "I didn't realize you were home," Ellie said quickly, her voice rising like a helium balloon no one asked for. "I noticed," I replied. There was a silence, long enough to make them squirm. I stepped fully into the kitchen, setting the groceries down with quiet precision. Then I turned to face them. "Don't stop on my account," I said, voice calm. "I'd love to hear more about how you plan to get my home and erase my life." Ellie's mouth opened and closed. Harper glanced away. We were just joking," Ellie said, too fast, too bright. "Of course," I said. "What's funnier than mocking your family and dividing up their things while they're still standing?" Harper shifted uncomfortably, cheeks pinking. It was a dumb thing to say. I ignored her and looked at Ellie. "So, tell me, when exactly did you start counting down the days until I stopped breathing?" Ellie's expression shifted, from guilt to something darker. Defensiveness, maybe. That wounded entitlement that bubbles up when people are caught being cruel and want you to feel bad for catching them. "I think you're taking this the wrong way," she said carefully. "We were just talking about how the house could be more functional, more modern." "This house has functioned just fine for nearly 50 years, I said, voice sharper now. "It raised 2 boys, survived 6 hurricanes, and hosted 34 Christmases. But you're right. I suppose nothing of value lasts unless it matches your aesthetic." Ellie crossed her arms. "I think you're overreacting." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I think you're underestimating me." A silence fell. Ellie blinked. Harper looked down at her shoes. I let the pause hang in the air like smoke. "You see this place as a future transaction," I said slowly. "Something to be flipped, renovated, absorbed into your portfolio. But to me, this house is memory. It's history. It's the place your husband called home, the place my husband died, and the place I have quietly maintained alone for the past decade. And if you think I'm just going to hand it over to someone who thinks I'm senile and my library is creepy, then you really don't know me at all. I turned then, calmly, and left the room. My footsteps echoed louder than I intended. Upstairs, I sank into the desk chair in my bedroom. My fingers felt stiff as I pulled open the drawer containing my will, the same will I'd drafted 10 years ago, leaving everything to my son, and by extension, Ellie. But not anymore. That night, I rewrote my entire estate plan. And not just the will, the trust, the titles, the beneficiaries. I called my lawyer the next morning. Ellie wanted to gut my house. She could gut a stranger's. Because this one, it would never belong to her. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. The lawyer didn't ask questions. I suppose when a woman in her late 60s calls at 7:45 in the morning and says, "I need to revoke my will and establish a new trust immediately," the tone of her voice answers everything. By 9:30, I was sitting across from Patrick Levine, who'd handled my estate since Gerald passed, in a sunlit office smelling faintly of lemon cleaner and ink. His desk was stacked with neat files. My name was already on top. "I reviewed your previous documents last night after your voicemail," he said. "I assume this is about a change in beneficiaries?" "It's about a change in reality," I replied, folding my hands in my lap. "I no longer wish for my house to be passed down to my son or his wife. In fact, I'd like it held in trust for the benefit of the local library system." Patrick blinked. A library? I built that library wing in Gerald's name. And I'd rather have it filled with children learning to read than have my home turned into an HGTV demolition project by people who call it depressing. He didn't argue, just nodded and began flipping through forms. It took 3 hours and a few raised eyebrows when I requested that a provision be added disallowing the property from being sold for at least 20 years. Let them really feel what it means to be excluded. "Would you like to notify your son of the change?" Patrick asked carefully. I looked him dead in the eye. "Not yet. Let him plan the remodel a little longer." He gave me the kind of smile attorneys save for clients who've discovered late-life boldness. Understood. As I walked back to my car, the sun was high, and my steps felt lighter than they had in years. Not because of vengeance. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. It's funny, you go so long being mom, Nana, honey, and you forget that before the titles there was a person. A woman with a mind, dreams, a name. My name is Eleanor Grant. Not Ellie's future burden. Not the owner of the sad little house with the creepy wallpaper. I was done being reduced. When I pulled into the driveway that afternoon, Harper's car was still there. A rust-colored compact she drove like she'd stolen it. I stepped into the house and called up the stairs. "Harper." She poked her head over the banister, chewing gum. "Yeah, we need to talk." 5 minutes later, she joined me at the kitchen table, looking every bit the teenager dragged into a parent-teacher conference she didn't ask for. "I heard what you said," I began. "All of it. And I need to understand where that came from." She shifted uncomfortably, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know. It was dumb. I didn't mean it like that." "But you did," I replied. "And I want to know why. Not to shame you, to understand." She hesitated, then shrugged. "It's just, I don't know. The house feels old. And you're always so quiet, like we're guests at a museum. And Mom says you're different lately." "Different how?" "She says you forget things more. That you get confused sometimes." I stared at her. "Do you think I'm confused?" Harper looked unsure. "Sometimes. You asked me twice last week if school was back in session." I laughed softly. "That's because I didn't believe your school starts in early August." I wasn't confused. I was appalled. A flicker of something passed across her face, the barest trace of a smile. "I'm not senile, Harper," I said gently. "And I'm not a ghost. I'm not a placeholder for your mother's Pinterest board. I'm a person. And this house, it's part of that." She looked down, fiddling with a napkin. "I wasn't trying to be mean. But you were, I said. And that's okay. As long as you learn from it. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she asked, quieter, "Are you going to kick us out?" "No," I said. "But I'm going to set boundaries. And you're going to learn to respect them." Her brows furrowed. "Like what?" "Like, you don't get to insult the place I live and still expect to benefit from it later. That's not how life works." She flushed. "So I'm cut out?" "Not necessarily," I said, leaning forward. "But let's just say the default plan has changed." That got her attention. She sat up straighter. "I'm not doing this to be cruel," I added. "But you and your mother have been living under the assumption that my life is a waiting room. I'm not waiting for death. I'm living. And I'm going to keep doing that, even if it means living without you in it for a while." She didn't respond, but her silence was thoughtful this time, not defiant. When she left, I saw her glance back at the house before climbing into her car. Just for a second, maybe realizing for the first time that this sad little house might have been something sacred, something real. That night, I poured a glass of wine and took out the old photo albums from the bookshelf Ellie wanted to burn. Pictures of Gerald, our sons when they were boys, summers in the garden, Christmases around the upright piano Harper found so outdated. A life built with love. And I thought, let them call it depressing. What's really depressing is raising a child who forgets where they came from. But what's powerful? Reclaiming who you are before they rewrite you out of your own story. 3 days passed without a word from Ellie. No surprise there. Her favorite strategy had always been avoidance, a silent war waged through tight smiles and exaggerated cheer. The kind of woman who said, "Bless your heart," through gritted teeth and considered passive aggression a form of sport. But on the 4th day, she showed up, uninvited. I saw her through the living room window, walking up the path in designer flats with a bakery bag in hand, the kind she pulls out when she wants to appear sweet. I considered not answering the door. But then I thought, no. Let her walk into the new rules. I opened it before she could knock. "Eleanor," she said brightly, "I brought croissants. From that place you like, La Miette." I stepped aside. "Let's not pretend this is about pastry." She faltered but walked in anyway, setting the bag on the kitchen counter like a white flag. "I wanted to clear the air," she began, perching on a stool as if she owned the place again. "I think there was a misunderstanding." "There wasn't." She blinked, thrown. "I just mean, look, I know what you overheard. And I shouldn't have said those things. We were joking, it got out of hand." "Jokes come from somewhere, Ellie." She glanced away, then tried again. "This house, it's a lot. For someone your age. We were just talking about the future." "My future, you mean?" She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "Don't be like that." I leaned against the counter. "I'm not being like anything. I'm simply stating facts." Ellie sighed. "Marcus, and I just think it's time to start making plans. He worries about you, you know. About the stairs. About the upkeep. You don't need all this space. And yet I manage it." Her eyes flicked toward the doorway, calculating. "He's only trying to help. We both are." I paused, then asked, "Ellie, tell me something. If I fell tomorrow, if I ended up in a care home, what's the first thing you'd do?" She blinked, startled. That's not a fair question. It's a real one." Her face hardened slightly. "I'd probably hire a realtor. This place would sit empty." And there it was. Not even hesitation. Not even a pretense. "I see," I said softly. "That's exactly why the trust is already signed." Her eyebrows shot up. "The what?" "I transferred the house into a legal trust," I said evenly. "It's no longer part of my will. It can't be inherited. Not by Marcus. Not by anyone. It's been designated for public use long term." The silence that followed was thick as cream. "You what?" she asked again, her voice lower now. "I've donated it. In full." Ellie stood, visibly rattled. "Are you out of your mind? Do you have any idea how much this place is worth?" I raised an eyebrow. "Apparently enough to make you fantasize about tearing it down while I'm still alive." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I've also set up a secondary account, I continued calmly. Any remaining personal assets, stocks, savings, annuities, are being split differently now. A portion will go to Harper under very specific conditions. The rest? Community education programs, literacy grants, creative workshops for women over 50. Ellie looked like I'd slapped her. So we get nothing? After everything Marcus has done for you? Everything? I asked, the calm cracking for just a second. What everything are we talking about, Ellie? The ignored phone calls? The half-hearted holidays? The way you both treat me like I'm in the way? Her face flushed. Marcus is your son. And I am his mother, I replied. Not his property. She took a shaky breath, clearly trying to compose herself. You're making a huge mistake. What are people going to say when they find out you gave your family's legacy away? I stepped forward. They'll say I finally remembered it was mine to give. That shut her up. She turned, muttering something about needing to speak to Marcus, and stormed out the door, slamming it behind her. The croissants sat untouched on the counter. I tossed them straight into the trash. That night, Marcus called. I didn't answer. Let them stew for a while. Instead, I pulled out the watercolor set that had gathered dust since Gerald died. I lit a candle, put on a jazz record, and painted the view from my bedroom window. The tall pines, the sweeping curve of the driveway, the sky just beginning to blush with dusk. It wasn't brilliant. It wasn't even good. But it was mine. And it had been years since I'd created something for no one's approval but my own. At midnight, I got a text from Harper. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Not yet. Some apologies require more than words. Some require growing up. But I smiled as I turned off the lamp beside my bed and lay back against the pillow, listening to the ocean wind whisper through the trees. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I felt like its rightful queen. It took Marcus exactly 24 hours to show up on my doorstep. He didn't text first. Didn't call. Just rang the bell like it was still 1995, and he was coming home from school, hoping I'd made spaghetti for dinner. When I opened the door, he looked more disheveled than I'd seen him in years. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, his hair unbrushed. No Ellie in sight. Can I come in? He asked. I paused, hand on the doorframe. I'm not here to fight, he added quickly. Just to talk. I stepped aside. He followed me into the kitchen, the same kitchen where his wife had once described my home as a relic. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. He didn't sit. I didn't offer him coffee. For a moment, we just stood there, 2 people staring across a marble counter, neither sure how to begin. Ellie told me, he finally said, about the trust. About everything. I nodded. I figured she would. He ran a hand through his hair. Why, Mom? Why would you do something like that without even telling me? Because it was never going to be a conversation, I replied. It would have been an argument. And I'm too old for one-sided debates. You think I wouldn't have understood? I gave him a look. Marcus, your wife called this house depressing. Your daughter said it smelled like mothballs and regret. And you? You didn't say a word. I didn't know they said that. But you believed it, I said. Even if you didn't say it aloud. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I continued. This house, this life, I've kept it running without anyone's help for over a decade. I've balanced the finances, done the yard work, replaced the water heater, even regrouted the upstairs shower myself. And not once in the last 10 years have you asked me what I want. It's always been assumed that eventually I'd fade out and you'd inherit what was left. Marcus looked down, jaw tight. Do you know the last time you asked me how I'm really doing? I pressed. Not just in passing. Not just, how's Mom? Out of duty. I'll tell you. It was the week after your father died. That's not fair, he started. Isn't it? His voice cracked slightly. You never said you needed anything. You always acted like you were fine. Because you needed me to be, I replied. And because I was afraid that if I stopped being strong, I'd become a burden. A long silence fell between us. Finally, he sat down. I didn't realize, he admitted. I really didn't. I guess I got used to thinking of you as unshakable. I was unshakable, I said. But that doesn't mean I wasn't tired. It doesn't mean I wanted to be alone all the time. I just stopped expecting anyone to notice. He nodded, staring down at the counter. Then he said something I didn't expect. I think I started distancing myself after Dad died. I didn't mean to. Every time I saw you, it reminded me of him. And that hurt. I blinked. That I hadn't considered. I didn't know how to be around you without him here, he added. So, I just let Ellie fill the space. And then I told myself you liked it that way. A lump formed in my throat. We sat in silence for a while. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have. I know I haven't been a great son, Marcus said finally. But, Mom, do you really have to cut me out completely? I mean, the house. The house is gone, I said gently. Not in a fire sale, not in spite. But because I wanted it to mean something. To be something. You saw it as square footage. I saw it as a sanctuary. And I needed to protect it. He nodded slowly. Harper told me you were right.
About what we said.
About how we've been acting.
She said that.
She said you called her out, he said. And that she deserved it. That surprised me. She also said she looked through the photo albums, he added. And that maybe she didn't understand what this house really was. I swallowed hard. I never meant to turn you into the villain, Marcus, I said after a long pause. But I had to draw the line somewhere. And this was it.
He looked at me.
Really looked. The way he hadn't in years. You could have just told me you wanted to feel seen. I did. Every holiday. Every time you asked what I wanted for Christmas and I said, just time. Every phone call where you rushed through the pleasantries like I was a checkmark on a list. I've been telling you for years. You just didn't hear it. His shoulders sagged. I hear it now. I didn't respond right away. Because hearing it now, after the documents were signed, after the betrayal was unearthed, didn't undo what had been lost. But maybe, just maybe, it was a start. I'm not rewriting the trust, I said softly. But you're still my son. And I'm open to building something new. Something not based on what either of us owed, but on what we still have left. He nodded. I'd like that. We sat in the kitchen for a while longer, not talking. Just existing in the quiet space between disappointment and reconciliation. Before he left, he paused at the door. Mom, he said, hesitating. What made you finally do it? The trust, I mean. What changed? I smiled faintly. Someone told me I probably wouldn't last another year. I figured I might as well make that year count. He had the decency to wince. As he walked back to his car, I stood at the window and watched him go, not out of sadness, not even out of habit, but with something that looked a little like hope. Maybe he was learning. Maybe I was, too. And either way, I wasn't waiting anymore. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Not because of a phone call. Not because someone needed something.
Just because I wanted to.
That in itself was a quiet miracle. I brewed a strong pot of coffee, wrapped myself in the shawl Gerald bought me on our last anniversary, and stepped out onto the back porch. The garden was still cloaked in morning mist, the hydrangeas heavy with dew. A single bird trilled from the birch tree near the fence. This was my favorite part of the day, the quiet before expectation. For so long, I had lived in other people's needs. Other people's schedules, their chaos, their comfort. But today, there were no errands for anyone else. No doctor appointments to coordinate. No forms to fill out for Harper's summer programs. No fake smiles to stretch across my face during Sunday brunch. Today was mine. I walked back inside and went to the linen closet. Tucked behind the extra towels and mismatched pillowcases was a long-forgotten portfolio case. Black leather, scuffed around the edges, but still intact. Inside were pieces of a woman I hadn't seen in decades. Sketches. Charcoal drawings. Watercolors from before the kids were born. A painting I started the year Gerald and I bought the house but never finished. A view of the back garden. Incomplete sky. Unpainted roses. My throat tightened as I ran my fingers across the canvas. It still smelled faintly of linseed oil and cedar. I had forgotten how much of myself I'd packed away when motherhood took over. How many parts one put on pause, telling myself I'd return to them someday. But someday always got rescheduled. Until now. I called the local bookstore that afternoon. Henry, the owner, had always been kind. I remembered he once converted the upstairs loft into a gallery space, mostly in use now, except for storing seasonal decorations and excess inventory. When he picked up, his voice was warm and familiar. Well, if it isn't Eleanor Grant, to what do I owe this pleasure? I need a favor, I said. There was a pause. That sounds promising. Do you still rent the loft space upstairs?
Technically, yes.
Though no one's used it in years. I'd like to see it. I'm thinking of starting something new. Another pause. Art. How'd you guess? I remember your college portfolio. You showed it to my mother once when you babysat me. She said you had more talent than half the artists she carried in her store. I laughed. That was before your knees creaked. And before yours did, he said without missing a beat. Come by tomorrow morning. I'll make sure the space is cleared out. The next day, I stood in the loft and stared at the sun filtering through the old arched windows. Dust floated like glitter in the air, and the wood floors groaned when I walked across them. But it had good bones. Good energy. It smelled like old books and dried paint. Henry appeared beside me, holding a box of cleaning supplies. It's yours, he said. No rent for the first 2 months. Call it a residency. I'm not a professional. Then this town's standards just got a whole lot higher. I spent the rest of the day sweeping, opening windows, and setting up a small corner with my easel and supplies. It felt sacred. Like stepping into a version of myself I'd buried under decades of responsibility. By sunset, I had made a decision. I was going to paint again. Not for profit. Not to prove anything. Just to feel. On my way home, I stopped by the little bakery on Main, the same one Ellie tried to bribe me with, and bought a box of almond croissants. Not out of guilt, but because I liked them. And I no longer wanted to associate them with her manipulation. As I waited in line, someone tapped my shoulder. Eleanor. I turned and froze. Standing there, with salt and pepper hair, square glasses, and a crooked smile I remembered from over 40 years ago, was Cal Whitman. Gerald's old friend. And mine before life got complicated. Cal, I said, stunned. I thought you moved to Vermont. I did. Retired from the university last spring. But I'm back for the summer. Staying with my niece while I figure out what's next. He looked at me a moment longer, like he was trying to see if I was still me beneath the years. You haven't aged a day, he said finally, voice soft. I raised an eyebrow. Either your memory's gone, or your flattery's improved. That made him laugh. You always did have the sharpest comebacks in the room. We stepped out together, and he walked me to my car. It felt oddly natural, like time had folded over itself, and we were slipping back into an unfinished sentence from long ago. You look good, Eleanor, he said, more seriously now. Different. Lighter. I hesitated, then said, I just reclaimed something I'd forgotten was mine. He tilted his head. What's that? Myself. He didn't press. Just nodded like he understood. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. He promised to come by the bookstore loft once I'd settled in, not to intrude, but to see what the woman who used to outpaint everyone in studio class had been hiding all these years. As I drove home, croissants beside me, window rolled down and wind tangling my hair, I felt it for the first time in months. Possibility. Not revenge. Not grief. Just a wide, open future with no script. And I realized something. They had tried to write me out. But I was just beginning a new chapter. 2 weeks passed. 2 delicious weeks of uninterrupted mornings spent in the loft above Harborside Books, where sunlight filtered through stained glass windows onto my easel. My hands were stiff at first, but memory returned like muscle, slowly, and then all at once. I painted like a woman starving. I painted the lighthouse Gerald once told me looked like a soldier standing guard over the town. I painted the storm that came the night after his funeral. I painted my garden in spring, my bedroom at dusk, the warped steps on the back porch where Harper used to sit with a popsicle dripping down her hand. But most of all, I painted her. The woman I used to be. Before motherhood. Before widowhood. Before invisibility. She was hard to capture at first. But by the end of the second week, she stared back at me from a self-portrait like she never left. Henry wandered up one afternoon with a coffee and froze when he saw the canvas. "You're putting this in the window," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He gestured toward the portrait, a moody, oil-rich expression of a woman standing at the edge of the ocean, wind in her hair, fire in her eyes. It was more metaphor than mirror, but it was me. "I'm putting together a local arts feature for the store's 35th anniversary," he continued. "You're going in it." I opened my mouth to protest. "Don't argue," he added. "The list already has 3 landscape artists, one guy who welds license plates into owls, and 2 retired dentists who paint lighthouses on driftwood. We need a headliner." I laughed. "That's not saying much." "You haven't seen the owls," he said. "Yours is real work." I hesitated. "Don't do that," he added. "Don't shrink from this. You disappeared from your own story long enough."
He was right.
So I said yes. The painting went in the front window the following Saturday, centered in a display surrounded by art books, a small sign that read, "Reclaimed, the art of Eleanor Grant. Loft Gallery opening August 12th. I expected maybe a few curious passersby. But I hadn't accounted for small-town whisper networks, especially the Over 60 Coffee Club at the Sandpiper Diner. By Tuesday, the display was the talk of the town. By Wednesday, Henry said a reporter from the local paper wanted to interview me. By Thursday, Ellie walked into Harborside Books and nearly choked on her own latte. I had my back to her. I was upstairs, setting out my brushes, when I heard the bell on the door downstairs and her unmistakable voice say, "Hi, I'm looking for." Then a pause, a sharp intake of breath, followed by, "That's Eleanor." Henry told me later she stood frozen in front of the window for almost 3 full minutes, just staring. I don't know what bothered her more, the painting itself or the fact that people liked it. By the time I came downstairs, apron still on, streaks of cadmium red on my forearm, she was gone. But her echo lingered in the room like expensive perfume clinging to judgment. Henry handed me a coffee and grinned. "I don't know what she expected," he said. "But I think it involved you being buried quietly under a throw blanket and a book club calendar." I shook my head. "She doesn't see me." "She doesn't want to see you," he replied. "Not like this." I sipped my coffee and watched people outside pause in front of the window, a group of teenagers pointing, a retired couple nodding in appreciation, even the mayor's wife peering through her sunglasses like she might buy something. Then something clicked. Ellie hadn't just dismissed me out of carelessness. She dismissed me because if I became visible again, really visible, then she'd have to confront what she'd done to keep me small. And that, more than anything, made her uncomfortable. That evening, I got a message from Harper.
"Hey,
Mom told me about your painting. I want to see it. Can I come by sometime?" I stared at the text for a long time before replying.
sure.
"This weekend."
But only if you're coming because you want to.
"Not to be a spy." Her reply came almost instantly.
Promise."
On Saturday morning, Harper stepped into the gallery space upstairs. She wore a hoodie pulled halfway over her head, the universal teenage shield. But when she looked up and saw the wall of paintings, her expression shifted. "Whoa," she whispered. She walked slowly, studying each one, pausing in front of the self-portrait longer than the others. "Is this really you?" she asked. "It's who I used to be, maybe who I still am."
She glanced at me.
"It's intense. It's honest." She nodded. Then, to my surprise, she said, "You should put this online. Like Instagram or whatever. People would go crazy for it." I smiled faintly. "Maybe someday." "No, seriously. It's kind of badass." There it was again. That word, badass. A term I never imagined being applied to a woman in orthopedic shoes with arthritis in her left wrist. But Harper meant it. And something in her expression told me she was seeing me for the first time as more than a grandmother with a stocked fridge and a habit of correcting her grammar. She saw a woman, a creator, a force. And I realized I didn't need Ellie's validation. I had already outrun her expectations. And the finish line wasn't even in sight yet. The envelope was cream-colored, hand-addressed in Marcus's blocky handwriting. It arrived on a Tuesday, slipped into my mailbox between a dentist flyer and an alumni newsletter from a college I hadn't donated to in years. I recognized the writing instantly. No return address. Just my name. Eleanor Grant. No, Mom. No, Mrs. Just Eleanor. I stood in the foyer, sunlight angling across the hardwood, and opened it with steady fingers. Inside was a folded note on thick stationery and an invitation card bordered in pale gold. You are invited to celebrate Harper's Senior Honors Night. June 17th, 6:30 p.m. Waverly Ridge High School Performing Arts Center. Reception to follow at the home of Marcus and Ellie Grant. Tucked inside was a short note.
Mom.
Harper asked me to send this personally. She wants you there. We all do. I know things are still tense, but maybe this could be a turning point. You've been such a big part of her life. She wants you to see this.
Love.
Marcus. I read the note twice. Once as a mother, and once as the woman I had become. And those two versions of me weren't quite in agreement. On the one hand, Harper had changed. I had seen it in her eyes when she visited the gallery. A softness. A genuine interest. A curiosity I never imagined would grow from someone who once mocked the very walls of my home. But on the other hand, "We all want you there" felt performative. We all. Meaning Ellie too. I could see it already. The way she'd greet me at the door with a brittle smile and a wine glass. The way she'd refer to me as Eleanor in front of her friends to keep things formal. The way she'd guide conversations back to herself with well-rehearsed stories about managing the school auction and Harper's incredible scholarship offers. It would be familiar. And that was the problem. Familiar used to mean comfort. Now it meant suffocation. Still, I left the envelope on the table for 3 days. I let it sit like a riddle waiting for its answer. On the 4th day, I received a text from Marcus.
Just checking in.
Harper's been working on her speech. You're mentioned in it. She'd be crushed if you didn't come. The words crushed and speech twisted something inside me. A thread I thought I'd cut loose, suddenly tugging again. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'll be there. But I won't be attending the reception. The response came quickly. Okay, I understand.
Thank you, Mom.
He used mom. The smallest word. But it landed differently now. Not as a leash, but as a thread of something frayed and slowly mending. On the evening of the event, I dressed with more deliberation than I had in years. A navy silk tunic with silver beading at the neckline, bought in a Florence market during the trip they still pretended never happened. Soft slacks. Comfortable heels. Understated. But unmistakably me. I drove myself. Parked in the far corner of the school lot, next to the oak tree that had always dripped pollen in spring. The auditorium was already filling up when I arrived. Parents jostled politely for aisle seats. Teachers mingled near the podium. And there in the second row, I spotted them. Marcus, Ellie, and Harper. Marcus saw me first. He gave a small nod and acknowledgement, not a greeting. A signal that he knew what it meant for me to be there. Ellie turned. Her smile was tight, controlled. She was wearing white, of course. Power dressing disguised as elegance. But Harper? Harper's face lit up. She rose from her seat and crossed the row in 2 strides, pulling me into a hug before I could brace myself. I'm so glad you came, she whispered. I was worried you'd say no. I almost did, I whispered back. She pulled away, grinning. Well, I'm glad you didn't. You look amazing. And in that moment, that blink of sincerity, I remembered why I came. It wasn't for Marcus. It wasn't for Ellie. It was for her. For the girl who was learning slowly that women like me don't just disappear. That we burn bright, and sometimes we rise again. The ceremony began. Names were read. Certificates were handed out. But when Harper walked on stage and stepped behind the podium, the entire auditorium stilled. Her speech wasn't long, but it was direct. She spoke about resilience, about people who held up the corners of her world when others were too busy to notice, about the difference between being loud and being strong. Then, she looked right at me. My grandmother taught me that silence isn't weakness, that you can rebuild your life, even if everyone around you has already written the ending. She showed me how to reclaim your story, and that's the legacy I'm proud to carry. Gasps rippled through the rows. I looked around and saw Ellie stiffen beside Marcus, frozen in her seat, lips pressed so tight they were almost colorless. But I didn't care, because Harper saw me, and she let the world see me, too. After the ceremony, a stream of people came to congratulate her. I stayed near the exit, not wanting to be dragged into photo ops or polite banter. Marcus approached me before I could leave. "That was a beautiful speech," he said. "She wrote it," I replied. "I know," he said. "And she meant every word." He paused, then added, "I meant what I said before. Thank you for coming. Even with everything. I didn't come for you." "I know." He reached out, then hesitated, as if unsure whether he had the right to hug me anymore. "I hope one day we can get to a place where you would," he said. I gave a small smile. "We're not there yet." And then I walked out into the night, cool air brushing against my skin like applause from the universe itself. Let Ellie throw her reception. Let her serve canapes to people who forgot my name. I had already won the only legacy that mattered. Being remembered, truly remembered, by the one person still learning how to honor story instead of erase it. The morning after Harper's speech, I woke up to a voicemail from someone I hadn't heard from in decades. "Eleanor," the voice began, warm and familiar. "This is Rachel Langford. We were in that short-lived gallery collective together back in '85. You probably don't remember me, but I saw your name in the paper. I saw your painting, and I showed it to someone who wants to meet you. Someone influential. If you're open to it, call me back." I sat on the edge of my bed, still half in my robe, and played the message again. Rachel Langford. My stomach flipped. She used to run a gallery out of Seattle that only showed female artists over 40. She once told me my color work reminded her of Georgia O'Keeffe with just enough storm in the brush. We'd lost touch when I had Marcus. I had let her slip away along with everything else. Until now. I called her back before I even brushed my teeth. "Eleanor," she said, voice bright with surprise. "I didn't expect you to call so fast. I didn't expect to want it." She laughed. "Well, I'm glad you did. Listen, the man I want you to meet runs a curated exhibit every year in Santa Fe. It's called Unfinished Women. They feature female artists who left the field and came back stronger. Your story? It's exactly what they're looking for." I blinked. "I'm not exactly contemporary," I said. "That's the point," she replied. "You're relevant. There's a difference." We spoke for 45 minutes. By the time I hung up, I had agreed to submit 5 paintings for consideration, including the self-portrait in Henry's bookstore window. Rachel offered to personally drive them down if I preferred not to ship. "I'm not promising anything," she said, "but I have a good feeling."
So did I.
Later that afternoon, I went to the gallery to pick up the portrait. Henry stood beside it like a museum guard. "You sure you want to take it down?" he asked. I hesitated. "Only for a little while." He nodded, helping me unhook it from the display. We wrapped it in layers of paper and bubble wrap. As I walked it out to my car, I felt like I was carrying a version of myself that was finally going somewhere she'd always meant to go. That evening, as I was rinsing paint from my brushes, my phone buzzed with a text. "Cal, heading through your part of town tomorrow. Coffee?" My fingers paused over the sink.
Cal.
We hadn't seen each other since the bookstore run-in, though we'd texted a few times. Casual things. Art jokes. Memories. Movie recommendations. But the idea of sitting across from him again, deliberately, without history's haze or old grief dulling the edges, made something shift inside me. I replied, "Sure." 11 a.m. Sandpiper Diner? The next morning, he was already there when I arrived. A booth in the back, 2 mugs of coffee waiting, one with cream just how I like it. He stood when he saw me, smiling in that easy, open way of his. You really haven't changed, he said. You have, I replied. More relaxed. He chuckled. That's retirement. The only thing I rush now is toast. We talked for an hour. About Harper's speech. About the gallery space. About how small towns turn everyone into quiet celebrities if you stir the right pot. Then, over his third refill of coffee, he said, I've been thinking about spending more time here. Permanently. I raised an eyebrow. Cape Haven's a far cry from Burlington.
True, he said.
But the view's better. Something in his tone made me pause. A softness I hadn't expected. You thinking of buying property? I asked, deflecting. Maybe, he said. But I'd want to be near people I care about. He said it without looking at me. I looked down at my napkin, suddenly aware of how long it had been since someone looked at me like I mattered. Not as a mother. Not as a widow. Just me. I'm not looking to be rescued, I said carefully. Good, he replied. Because I'm not looking to rescue anyone. Just maybe share a view now and then. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he pulled something from his coat, a small sketch pad. Your gallery inspired me, he said. I hadn't picked up charcoal in 10 years. But this was last night. He turned the page. It was a drawing of a woman on a balcony, looking out over the ocean. The lines were spare, suggestive, powerful in its restraint. It was me, Cal. I began, stunned. I remembered you in motion, he said, always looking forward. I didn't have words for the feeling that welled up in my chest, so I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached across the table and touched his hand. Just for a moment. Enough to say, I see you, too. That night, I stood in my studio and stared at a blank canvas. I had finished 4 of the 5 pieces for the Santa Fe exhibit. But I knew the 5th, the final one, had to be different. It wasn't about my past. It wasn't even about Harper or Marcus or Ellie. It was about what came next. So I painted. Until midnight. Until the candle burned low and the air turned thick with linseed and possibility. The woman I painted wasn't standing at the edge of the ocean anymore. She was walking into it. Not to disappear, but to emerge. The email arrived just after sunrise. I was watering my garden when my phone buzzed with a notification. I dried my hands on my robe and opened it, barely breathing. Subject: Exhibition Selection, Unfinished Women, Santa Fe. Dear Ms. Eleanor Grant, we are thrilled to inform you that your submitted works have been selected for the 27th Annual Unfinished Women exhibit. Your story and artistry stood out as a powerful reminder of resilience, reclamation, and the enduring strength of creative identity. We would be honored to feature your collection, including the new piece, Into the Tide, as a central installation for this year's show. The exhibit opens September 9th. Travel and lodging will be arranged. With admiration, Jillian Rivera, Curator, Unfinished Women Exhibit. Santa Fe Contemporary Art Center. I reread it twice. Then once more. Then I sat down right there in the grass and cried. Not from sadness, not from grief, but from the release of it all. The work was being seen. I was being seen. Not as Marcus's mother. Not as Harper's grandmother. Not even as Gerald's widow. But as Eleanor Grant. And then, as if summoned by the universe to test me, my phone rang. Ellie. I let it ring.
Twice.
Then answered. Eleanor, she said, not even waiting for hello. Are you free this evening? We're hosting a neighborhood wine night, and several families specifically asked if you'd be attending. I think it would be a great opportunity for you to clear the air. I blinked, still holding the phone in one hand, the exhibition email in the other. Clear the air? I echoed. She laughed lightly, the sound falsely sweet. Well, you've been the talk of the town lately. Your art.
The speech.
The whole thing with Harper. People are curious. Curious about what? There was a pause. Then, whether this new performance of yours is a phase or something we should be adjusting to. I stood up slowly. Ellie, I'm not a trend. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I just think people are confused. You've changed so much. It's disorienting. You always used to be so manageable, graceful, she corrected. I just think showing your face and participating could help smooth things over. You mean help you save face? Silence. She didn't deny it. I appreciate the invitation, I said, but I'll be attending an arts exhibition in Santa Fe next month. I've been selected as a featured artist. I let that hang there like an oil painting in a silent room. You're leaving? She said finally, her tone shifting, sharp edges emerging. With everything going on here? What about Harper's graduation? I'll be back in time, I said. But I won't be spending my summer playing hostess to a neighborhood that didn't know I existed until my portrait went in a window. Eleanor, she said tightly, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You've become impossible to talk to. Unpredictable. People don't know what to make of you. Then maybe they're finally starting to see me, I replied. And if that makes them, or you, uncomfortable, that says more about your expectations than it does about me. Before she could respond, I hung up. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. 3 days later, Harper came by the studio after school. She brought iced coffee and an apology letter, handwritten in purple ink. I know I already said sorry, she mumbled, handing it to me, but I wanted to say it again. Better. The note was short, thoughtful, and heartbreakingly sincere.
Grandma.
I didn't realize I was becoming like her. I do now. I'm watching. I'm learning. Thank you for not giving up on me.
Ash.
I set it beside my easel and pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a second, then relaxed fully. And in that small movement, I saw the difference. Before, she tolerated me. Now, she trusted me. That Saturday, Henry hosted a small send-off reception at the bookstore. Nothing formal, just community, artists, locals, a few gallery owners from nearby towns. Cal came, too, in a dark shirt that somehow made him look 10 years younger. He brought wine and a proposal, not for marriage, for collaboration. You do color. I do form, he said. Let's do something together this fall. Something bold. We'll show them what 60 looks like when it stops apologizing. I laughed. Only if you let me choose the palette. Only if you promise not to paint me in orthopedic shoes. Fair trade. But of course, because life always reserves a plot twist when you least expect it, Ellie showed up. Uninvited. Wearing a dramatic shawl and a frozen smile, she entered Henry's bookstore like she owned a slice of it. The room went still. Everyone noticed. She made a slow circuit around the gallery wall, stopping at the self-portrait, into the tide. Then, with studied casualness, she said, just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. This one doesn't even look like you. It's too strong. I turned to face her.
Calm.
Ready. It's not supposed to look like me, I said. It's supposed to show who I became when I stopped asking for permission. Someone nearby murmured, well said. Ellie's face twitched. She glanced around, realizing this crowd didn't belong to her. Not anymore. Then she did something I never expected. She walked out.
Nugodbis.
No scene. Just a woman who had lost the plot. And the author no longer interested in writing her back in. Santa Fe was hotter than I expected. The sky stretched wide, endless, the kind of blue that felt painted by God's own hand. The streets buzzed with a mix of tourists and locals, the smell of chili and sage wafting through adobe alleys. Everything here felt older, but not tired, aged like ironwood or stone.
Seasoned.
Proven. Like me. The unfinished women exhibit was being held at the Santa Fe Contemporary Art Center, a building made of glass, steel, and reclaimed wood that somehow shimmered against the desert. Inside, it was cool and quiet. A reverent kind of space. Like a cathedral built for second chances. My paintings hung in the West Gallery. All 5 of them. Into the Tide had been chosen as the centerpiece. A large placard beside it read, Eleanor Grant. After a 30-year hiatus, Eleanor Grant returned to painting at age 68. Her work reclaims personal history, generational silence, and the fierce beauty of aging on one's own terms. I read it twice, then turned to take in the room. People were already beginning to filter through critics, collectors, students with notebooks, tourists in wide-brimmed hats. I saw one woman stand in front of my self-portrait with tears in her eyes. She touched her chest like the painting had reached in and rearranged something there. Rachel appeared at my side, clipboard in hand. "You're the first one people talk about when they leave the gallery," she whispered. "You've got something bigger than just brushwork. You've got voice." I smiled. I think I finally gave myself permission to use it. "You're not just unfinished," she said. "You're redefining what finished even means." I looked around at the women in the room, some older, some younger, all of them moving differently. You could tell who had done their disappearing already and who still stood at the edge of it, deciding whether or not to step back in. And that's when I saw her, Harper, standing in the doorway with her phone in one hand and a small leather backpack slung over her shoulder. Her eyes wide, her mouth open just slightly. She caught my gaze, grinned, and made a beeline for me. "I told Mom I was going to visit a college campus," she said breathlessly. "But I wanted to see this." "You flew here?" I asked, stunned. "Cal helped me book the flight," she said, shrugging. "You told me once that someday I'd understand. I didn't want to wait for someday." I hugged her, tighter than I expected. "Did you tell your father?" I asked. She shook her head. "Not yet. I figured you deserved something first. Something just for you." That evening, we walked the exhibit together, just the two of us. She paused in front of the lighthouse still stands, my stormy, brooding homage to the life I built after Gerald passed. "This one feels like you," she whispered. "Like the you I didn't see before." "That's because I never showed her," I replied. "Not fully. I wish I'd noticed sooner." "So do I said honestly. "But noticing now? That matters more." At the gala reception, the exhibit's curator, Jillian Rivera, took the stage to say a few words. I expected a brief mention, a polite thank you. Instead, she called my name, and then, to the sound of soft applause, asked me to speak. I froze for a beat, then walked to the podium, slow, deliberate, feeling every step like I was walking a road paved by the version of myself I had nearly buried. I stood in front of a room full of strangers and cleared my throat. "I used to believe that reinvention had an age limit," I began. "That at some point, you just had to settle for being whoever the world had already decided you were." I looked down at Harper in the front row. And then one day, I realized the scariest thing wasn't change, it was staying small out of habit. A quiet murmur swept the room. I wasn't unfinished because I paused painting. I was unfinished because I let other people finish the sentence for me. I paused. "I'm here to reclaim my sentence." Applause erupted. Not polite, not indulgent, but real. The kind that echoed. When I stepped down, Harper was crying. "I'm going to write about this," she said.
For my senior project. About you.
"Write what you need to write," I told her. "But make sure your story is yours, too." A week later, I returned home to Cape Haven. My studio smelled of paint and salt air. Waiting on my doorstep was a small envelope from Marcus. Inside was a note.
"Mom,
Harper told me everything. I don't know what to say, except thank you. You're doing what I wish Dad had done after retirement, something just for yourself. I think he'd be proud. I'm trying to be better. If you're willing, I'd love to come by the studio sometime. No assumptions. Just curiosity, asterisk. Love. Marcus." I set the letter on my desk and opened the window. The ocean sang against the cliffs, steady and sure. There would be more chapters ahead. Some peaceful, some messy. But for the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of the page. I was writing it in ink. Sometimes the greatest act of rebellion isn't walking away, it's finally walking toward yourself. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe and remember, it's never too late to become the author of your own life.